Spring is in the air, and it's interim title season down here in the dirty South. Hello, friends. Welcome. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti. That man is Meshew, and this is the UFC 236 preview show. We are here in downtown Atlanta, Georgia, and we are ready to break down all of this action ahead of Saturday night. And first things, Jed, thank you for welcoming us to your fair city. You were an Atlanta boy, Georgia boy through and through. I was born here. I actually haven't been back since I was a toddler, I gotta say. Feels nice, man. It feels right.
Yeah, you could have come back. You know, the UFC was here like 3 years ago. Not sure why you didn't want to love me then, but I'm glad you're loving me right now. It's a great city with a lot to offer for you.
It absolutely is. And this is, this is a relatively unique weekend in a few ways. It's a top-heavy card. It's a championship doubleheader, but it's only a championship doubleheader of sorts. It is of the interim title variety. Max Holloway versus Dustin Point for the UFC interim lightweight title in the main event. Kelvin Gastelum and Israel Adesanya for the middleweight title in the co-main. Now, interim titles get a bad rap these days, and in my opinion, justifiably so. They have kind of been a scourge of this sport lately. But man, I have to say, this seems like one of those rare instances where you can kind of justify them. They kind of make sense in a strange way. We all know what's going on with the lightweight division. It's a bit of a mess right now.
Do we? Do any of us know what's going on with that division?
I think that is a perfect way to explain it. It's a bit of a mess right now. Middleweight division, Robert Whittaker is going to be out for a while. So let me start here with you. This whole card generally, the setup for this card. Do you like what the UFC is doing here, keeping these divisions moving with these interim titles? Or do you see this more as just a sad reflection of kind of where we've gotten as a sport?
A little of column A, a little of column B. I mean, I honestly feel a lot less bad about interim titles than most people do. Give more fighters gold. Who cares, really? It's a promotional tool. At the end of the day, we all know an interim title isn't a real title, and I think we all kind of view former interim champions along that light, unless they went on to win the actual belt. So I'm okay with it, and especially when you've got fights like this. I mean, these are two sensational fights, so why not let them fight for a gold belt? Maybe it's just a number one contender championship, essentially, a placeholder of sorts, but I'm for it. Atlanta doesn't get many championships, so I'm okay. We'll take whatever ones we can get. So even if it's two interim, we'll take them.
Well, hey, man, let's start with this main event because there is a lot to like here. Max Holloway versus Dustin Point. It's been talked a lot about this week. It is a rematch. Those guys fought back in 2012. That was Max Holloway's UFC debut. Dustin ended up winning by a first-round submission. That was so long ago, 7 years. Both men were absolute babies in their career. Max Holloway, again, that was his UFC debut. I don't know that there's a lot you can really take from that fight and project towards this fight. So let's start with Max. Here is the UFC featherweight champion. He is a dominant champion in this promotion, and he is really riding the best run of his entire career. He is coming off of the performance of a lifetime against Brian Ortega, a record-setting performance. And here he is moving up to 155 pounds. He's always been a big featherweight. So I don't think that anybody expects him to be outsized in this division, out-muscled in this division. We've even seen it in the face-offs. He's actually a little bigger than Dustin when it comes to just height in general. But I want to ask you, man, do you like this move to lightweight right now for Max Holloway and where he is in his career? And what do you expect from him in this division?
Again, I'm going to hedge a little here and give you a little bit of both answers. I like the decision for him. We've spoken about it kind of earlier. I do think Max is very young. He's 27 years old, but it's really all about fight years. And, he's been fighting since he's a baby. And so I'm not sure how much longer peak Max Holloway has to kind of run through MMA. So I think moving up now is great because in the lightweight division, if you're not at the top of your game, you're going to fall quickly. That division is just filled with sharks. And so I think it's good for him in that regard. There are a lot of interesting matchups at lightweight. I think there are a ton of fights. Tony Ferguson, I know he's on the sidelines, but that has to be a fight we'd all love to see at some point. Yeah. So along those regards, I think it's a great call for him. I'm not as huge a fan of it just because he still is holding that featherweight title. And I know there's maybe not a clear-cut contender for him, but I like what John Jones has said he's going to do this year. Just get reps. I'm going to defend that title over and over again. I think that's a thing that we kind of overlook in the moment, and when we look back on people's careers, we realize, wow, Demetrius Johnson defending the belt 57 times is incredibly impressive, and it's just one of those things you kind of can't see the forest for the trees. So I do wish he would be defending his title instead, but a great opportunity for him and a great fight, and certainly something I'm interested to see.
Yeah, and he has had troubles on the scale over the last couple years. As he's gotten older, it has been harder for him to make this weight. It seems like he has such a pace-driven style, though. It really is momentum-based. Once he gets going, it's like a snowball rolling down a hill. He will just overwhelm you. Do you think that style can be helped by this move to 155, having more energy, having to not focus his entire week on cutting down and really just dehydrating his body to a crazy degree?
I mean, certainly. It's definitely going to help him kind of exacerbate all those good qualities that he takes and, frankly, that he used to kind of dismantle Jose Aldo twice. Whether that is still going to work at lightweight, I'm interested to see because, he is also going up a weight class. So he's going to get those kind of advantages that he already plies his trade on functionally. But will he be able to kind of hurt Dustin Poirier with an accumulation of strikes? Because that is largely how he gets it done. He kind of death by 1,000 cuts you. And as the fight goes on, you just can't take any more. I'm curious to see if that power will hold up going up or if it's just going to be him swatting at Dustin and not really landing anything. So that pace doesn't hurt Dustin and leaves Dustin opportunities to score later in the fight.
Yeah, we even saw him, both guys mentioned it this week, that Max Holloway does get hit too. He got hit over 100 times by Brian Ortega. And Dustin Poirier said as much, if you let me hit you 100 times, you're going to sleep. This is a different division. So let's talk about Dustin, because this to me feels so fitting how he has sort of reached this point, right? Because this is the quiet killer, the eternal underdog, the man who is perennially just not discussed among that lightweight conversation. It's always the Conor McGregors or the Tony Ferguson or the Khabib Nurmagomedovs. But yet you look at where he is in his career, his last 10 fights, he has only lost one at lightweight, and he has really put together the best run of his entire career. His last three, Justin Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, Anthony Pettis, sensational performances. You cannot pile enough superlatives on them, finishing all three of those men. And yet I say it is fitting because he comes into this fight once again being overlooked, being the underdog to a man who hasn't even fought at 155, who is coming up from the lower division. The conversation this whole week has seemed to center around Max Holloway and what this could mean for his legacy and just his future. Are people overlooking once again, or are people sleeping on Dustin Poirier?
I think so, and I'll be frank, I think I might have been sleeping on him coming into this week. We're going to get to this in a moment, but I certainly came into this week believing this was kind of Max's fight to lose. But you're right. Look at who Dustin has fought in his last little run here. He's fought 3 champions in a row. Justin Gaethje, obviously the World Series champion, but Anthony Pettis, Gaethje, Eddie Alvarez, those are all former champions. This is going to be his 4th one in a row against one of the things I think we aren't talking enough about. I get that they were both featherweights. Obviously, Poirier kind of had a career there as well. But really, he came into his own as a lightweight. And I think despite the size difference, Max is a little bit taller. I think Dustin Poirier is a much bigger man, kind of just all around breadth-wise, I guess. And I'm interested to see how that's going to play out against Max because I do think that's a big advantage for him in this fight.
We alluded to it at the beginning of this show. But the lightweight division is a bit of a mess right now. It's hard to make sense of it. It's hard to make sense of really where the pieces fit because so many pieces are missing. So I want to ask you a simple question, and maybe it isn't even that simple. What does this fight mean? Dana White has repeatedly said that the winner of this fight will get the next shot at Khabib Nurmagomedov. But yet you know how things work in today's UFC. Conor McGregor is still out there. Tony Ferguson is still out there. Khabib Nurmagomedov isn't going to be back until probably the end of the year. Can you say with 100% certainty that the winner of this fight will get Khabib, knowing how flippant and willy-nilly and really just whatever the schedule demands the UFC is going to do? Can you say that the winner of this fight with 100% will get Khabib?
Absolutely not. You can't say with 100% certainty anything's going to happen in the lightweight division. I think that the winner of this fight has a really good chance to get Khabib, and that's
as best as you can do, right?
I mean, it is, and it feels a little ridiculous to say, but I do actually think that they'll have the opportunity to. I think if whoever wins, Max or Dustin, wins this fight on Saturday, I think they get the choice. If they want to sit out until Khabib has made it pretty clear he wants to come back in November, he's looking for the UFC's Madison Square Garden card that they tend to do kind of at the end of the year. If they want to wait for that, I think that opportunity is there for them. The only thing I could see that would stand in the way is if Conor unretires, unclear if he's ever actually retired. If he somehow unretired and took on Tony Ferguson sometime this summer, if in that world that happened, that the winner of that fight probably jumps ahead for the Khabib fight. But that's not really likely to happen. I think what's more likely to happen, and I know I've told you this before, a little bit of a take here. I think the winner of this fight is going to fight Conor McGregor in July, maybe even August, something like that, sometime late summer. Conor, before he retired, made overtures that he wanted to return sometime in the summer. Max, leading into this fight, has said he would have loved to greet Conor around July. I think the winner of this fight will fight Conor McGregor in the summer, and then the winner of that fight will go on to fight Khabib at the end of the year. And whoever comes at the end of this tournament of sorts, that's a massive fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Well, hey, let's break this fight down because it is such a sensational fight. Both of these men are really two of the most exciting men in the UFC as a whole. I can't think of a fight over the last several years that either one has been boring in. They're both two of the most technically proficient men in this division. How do you see this going? What are the paths to victory, I should say, for both men here? What are the questions they need to answer, and just where are you leaning?
It's really tough to say. I think for Max, it's pretty easy. His path to victory is be Max Holloway. I think a lot of people have said that this week, and it's pretty true. Assuming all factors stay the same with the weight move up and all the things that he brings to the table still play at 155, and largely it feels like they should. Just do that. Work your pace, work your pressure. Just stay on him. Dustin Poirier, obviously great cardio, but it's hard to keep up with Max Holloway for that long. Jose Aldo, I think it's fair to say was beating Max Holloway for most of their first two fights, but there just comes a point where you can't keep up with that, and when the tide turns, like you said, snowball rolling downhill. So for Max, it's just be yourself, go out there, let it all hang loose, and pile up on Dustin. Dustin will also give you chances to hit him. For Poirier, it's really different. It's very interesting. I think making it dirty is probably a pretty good weapon for him. He's had a lot of success with that kind of in the past. He's gotten a lot better over his last few fights at fighting at range, though. That's kind of where I'm the most interested to see what happens, because kind of before this recent run, those 3 victories that we talked about, you were able to kind of pick him apart on the outside or counter. He was pretty stagnant with some of his defense. He didn't have a lot of his head movement was regimented, pretty similar stuff. And like, look at the Conor McGregor fight. It took Conor McGregor 90 seconds or whatever it was to figure out, I just need to hit him. I need to swing back. He's going to pull his head, he's going to duck his head here, and he's going to catch him right there. So he's gotten a lot better. I think he can fight at range a little more. I do think he has the power advantage. So what he really needs to do is put hands on Max Holloway. He's going to be the bigger man. Hit him with as many shots as he can and wrestle. It's one of the things no one's talking about. Dustin Poirier is a willing wrestler. Yeah. He goes to it when he needs to, and he's a good wrestler as well. I think being able to mix things up against Max Holloway is going to be a huge effort for him. Max is obviously a great defender of the takedown, but whatever you can do to keep Max guessing, that's going to give more opportunities for you to land shots. And at the end of the day, the big power punches are probably Poirier's path to victory.
So where are you leaning, man? What's the pick? You got to make it.
I came into this fight week thinking this was all Max all day. As I kind of looked at more tape, thought things out, watch Dustin this week. This is not a disparagement or any type of comment on Max, but Dustin has been so focused this week. It is clear that there is nothing for him. He has blinders on for the title, and I think he's going to get it done. I think Max is there to be hit. They're going to get in some firefights. If Max is crazy enough to do the Ricardo Lamas point and swing against Dustin Poirier, which I hope. I think we should all hope for that.
I think we all hope for some part of that.
I'm not sure he can stand up to those blows from Dustin Poirier. He's one of the biggest punchers in the division. I say it all the time. I don't think people know it enough. So I'm picking Dustin Poirier.
Oh, upset.
Going for the upset here. I did not expect to be telling you this coming into fight week, but I just think he's got a lot of things going for him. And, when Max loses this, then he can go back down to featherweight, defend his belt against all the up-and-coming challengers there for him.
You picking a finish, or you going decision?
I'm picking a finish. However this goes, I can't possibly see it making 5 full rounds. They're both really tough, but they both work at a tremendous pace. Max has power. It's not the same power Dustin brings, but if they're throwing that heat for 5 rounds, someone's got to fall. I just don't believe it's possible. So maybe I'll be wrong and it's Max, but I do think it's a finish, and so I'm going with Dustin Poirier for a finish, probably 3rd round or so.
Interesting, calling your shot. All right, well, hey, let's keep things moving here, and let's talk about this co-main event. Israel Adesanya versus Kelvin Gastelum, really for the right to face Robert Whittaker at some point later this year. And let us start with Israel Adesanya, because this is a man who, ever since he sort of entered the MMA mainstream 14 months ago, I feel like a lot of people had earmarked him as a potential guy, a potential future star or future champion in this division. And I don't know that anything he has done has gone to dissuade that. You look at his schedule that he has kept: 14 months. This will be his 6th fight. He is 5-0. He just beat Anderson Silva just a few months ago. His pace that he has kept in terms of competing regularly is relatively remarkable, I will say. I don't know how that man is not exhausted at this point and still wants to keep going, but here we are. But yet he is fighting Kelvin Gastelum. And Kelvin Gastelum has proven himself to be someone who, if you're a hype train, if you have all the hype surrounding you and you fight Kelvin Gastelum, it generally doesn't go well for you. So I want to ask you, when you look at Israel Adesanya, what do you see? Do you see that is the hype founded? Is there substance there behind the flair? Or is he setting up for failure? Are you a believer in Israel Adesanya?
I'm mostly a believer in Israel Adesanya. I can't say 100%. I think this fight will honestly tell me the extent of it, because we do need to see him face a guy who's really, really focused on getting in his face, pressuring him. And I assume Gastelum is going to be looking for the takedown in this fight. That really just hasn't been a thing that we've seen a lot in the UFC. When you mentioned that he's done nothing to dissuade the notion that he's the next big thing, quibble with you a little bit there.
All right, hit me.
The Vettori fight had a lot of people cool their jets on him very quickly, because that was a much tougher fought decision than I think most people expected going in. And Marvin Vettori really, didn't have a great opening to that, but middle through the fight, he just figured, you know what, I'm just going to get in this guy's face, and that gave Izzy a lot of problems. And Kelvin Gastelum is much, much better at doing that. So that's what this fight that's why I'm excited about this fight. I think functionally how this will play out, it's probably going to be one-way traffic, one way or the other. Whoever kind of gets their hand raised is probably going to have the better of it from start to finish. But I am interested to see how Israel can do against a guy who's going to get in his face and not give him room to breathe. Against Anderson Silva, they're both largely playing a similar game. They want to operate at space, and if you choose to operate at space with them, that's a really bad decision. You're going to lose. Kelvin's not going to do that. And so this will kind of verify that hype train. I think it's fine anyway, even if he loses to Kelvin Gastelum. You're talking about one of the very, very best middleweights in the world here. But I do think if he wins, sky's absolutely the limit for Israel Adesanya.
Yeah, it is interesting watching Israel in the cage, right? Because it seems like he sets a lot of traps. He plays a lot of mental games in there with people. And Kelvin even this week told me, I'm not going to play those mind games with him. I'm not going to deal with that. Kelvin, really quickly, let's talk about him, because he is a unique character in this middleweight division for me. This is sort of history repeating itself. Just 2 months ago, he was going to fight for this title, and then it got swept away from him in the last second. Kind of ends up here with a spot that he didn't want to be in, and he has admitted it was hard to get up for this. But yet, he was always such a reluctant middleweight. Ever since he came into our lives through The Ultimate Fighter, he always said that he didn't want to move up to 185. He was too small for the division. He thought the reach issue would be a problem. And yet he has found, I think, surprising, even to himself, success here at 185. Are you surprised with the success that he has found at 185? And what do you think has been the formula for him that has proven to be a winning formula so far?
I'm not. I think most fighters in general, just kind of writ large, would benefit by moving up a weight class. I think it's better for them kind of physically. And I also, to be frank, I think usually the weight class above whatever fighter is in is worse than the weight class they are in. It's not true for featherweight. If you're a featherweight, moving up to lightweight is a real dangerous
That's a
game.
big ask, yeah.
And maybe the same holds true, for flyweight, moving up to flyweight. Henry Cejudo, we can talk about that later in the year. That's maybe a little bit more dangerous in those waters. But, I think Kelvin Gastelum obviously has had a ton of success, and I think we always could have expected that. His style, frankly, he hasn't had to fight a lot of guys that are massively bigger than him. Really, the biggest guy comparatively against him was Chris Weidman. We did see that size difference did kind of play a role there. But otherwise, he's mostly been able to avoid that. And, with Israel Adesanya, he weighed in 183 pounds. He's going to have a reach advantage, and he's much taller. Those kind of physical dynamics exist. But Israel Adesanya could probably make welterweight if he really wanted to try. So I think that's not been an issue for Kelvin. I don't think it would have necessarily been one anyway. He's got a great foundation, a great game, works with one of the best camps in the sport. So I think we could expect this from him. He was 21 when he came through The Ultimate Fighter. I believe that age is right. And you mentioned that history is repeating itself. I just want to throw this back to you. It is repeating itself, because if you remember in The Ultimate Fighter, for that title that he won, he had to face the next Anderson Silva.
That is a good point.
And that's what everyone is calling Israel Adesanya, this is the next Anderson Silva. And so now he gets another chance to do that with gold on the line again.
That is an interesting point, and you're not wrong. And in a way, this fight is almost a clash of so many things, right? It's a clash of body types, it's a contrast of styles to some degree. How's it go? What are the big questions and what are the paths to victory here for both men?
Honestly, I feel like the paths are pretty similar as in the main event. Israel Adesanya, he needs to keep it standing. He needs to do what he does best. He needs to stay at range and operate at range. And that's the big question. I think there really is only one question in this fight for me, and it's can Israel dictate that distance? And if he can keep Kelvin at the end of his reach, if he can keep circling away, prevent himself from being backed up to the fence, it's just going to be a long night for Kelvin. You can't discount Kelvin. He does have a lot of power in his left hand, but it seems very, very remote, the odds of him landing a big left hand on Israel Adesanya. If he does, he probably will, and I'll just look like an idiot. And that's fine.
Now you're setting yourself up. Yeah.
But it'll be awesome if he does, so I won't even be mad about it. But for Kelvin, he has got to eat space. He cannot give Izzy time to work, cannot give him space to operate in. He's got to get him back against the fence where Adesanya will be far less effective, stay in his grill with punches, get on the legs. And, we haven't seen it a lot. He hasn't used his wrestling a ton recently, but he needs to be grinding, needs to take this fight, slow it down, and maybe suck the fun out of the fight, but get the win.
Well, you know what I'm about to ask you. What's the pick? You got to make the pick.
Again, I came into this fight week thinking Kelvin Gastelum all day.
Interesting.
I did. I thought as an underdog, it was ridiculous that he was the underdog. He's got this great stylistic kryptonite, and he's a much better version of Marvin Vettori in some respects, and Marvin Vettori gave Adesanya a ton of trouble. But as I'm watching it, the big concern, I guess, with me with picking Izzy, because that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to pick the favorite this time, is that schedule. We've seen Donald Cerrone has mentioned it, probably the most prolific fighter in that sense, that kind of fighting that often can wear you, can be a grind, can be maybe too much and kind of ruin things. And this is going to be his 6th fight in 14 months. So I'm a little concerned there, but I think that reach is going to be hard for Gastelum to get around. And it feels like such a one-note fight. Gastelum can mix it up with tricks, but really he's got one avenue that he needs to exploit. And I just feel like Izzy's so good, his coaching, his training is so sharp that they're going to be ready to kind of mitigate that and keep this fight where they want it. Maybe not be a great victory, but they're probably going to just pot shot their way to a win. Interesting.
Well, hey, let's take a quick look at the rest of this pay-per-view card. As I said at the top, we'll be honest, it's not the best pay-per-view we've ever seen. Still some fun matchups there. And so let's start with a light heavyweight affair between Khalil Roundtree Jr. and Eric Anders. Both big punchers. It seems like someone's probably going to be unconscious relatively quickly. Maybe not quickly, but at some point in the fight, someone's lights are probably going out. Make a quick pick. How you see this going? Who you taking?
Great question. Coin flip. It could really happen.
It seems like it, right?
It really is. Just whoever lands the first big shot. I think this has a great opportunity for a performance of the night bonus. I'm going to go with Khalil Roundtree. No real reason. Just I mean, like I said, it's a coin flip. I could have picked either way and be fine, but. I do think Khalil Roundtree is going to rebound from his last loss. We saw him knock out Gokhan Saki, and I think that's really it because no one expected that. And so I just got to believe in it. If you can knock out Gokhan Saki, you can do anything. That's my stance.
Except beat Johnny Walker.
Well, Johnny Walker is a whole different animal. So, but yeah, give me Khalil Roundtree. I'm going first round KO.
All right, calling the shot. Next up, Dwight Grant versus Alan Jouban, the veteran versus the newcomer. How you seeing this?
This might be a drag. Alan Jouban's a really good fighter. He also almost always goes to decision, and it's not maybe the most aesthetically pleasing fights that he's in. Really smart, really tactical, and he does enough to outpoint his opponents. When I talked to him earlier this week, he said that he thinks kind of his best attribute is his ability to control momentum, and he really does that a lot. He takes the momentum away from his fighters, gets them to fight kind of his pace and what he wants to do. I think he's probably going to be able to do that again. Dwight Grant's just green, and I know he's been around for a little bit. He's not a young guy per se, but this is a huge step up in competition, so I got to go with Jouban, of course, by decision.
Okay, rounding out the main card and actually opening the main card is that I believe a sneaky good light heavyweight affair. Nikita Krylov versus Ovince St. Preux. This might actually sneakily, as I say that word again, sneakily be a fight that could end up meaning something pretty significant. I mean, you talked about it. John Jones is just trying to go through contenders left and right this year. That's sort of his goal. He's going to run out of contenders fast. The winner of this fight might be 1 or 2 wins away from being in that conversation. And this is actually a rematch of a fight that we saw all the way back 5 years ago in 2014. And why was that fight so infamous?
It was the first Von Preux choke, the first ever choke that Ovince St. Preux landed, that shoulder choke that's commonly known as the Von Flu, that has been renamed after him since he's hit
Justifiably so.
He's hit it 3 times, which is insane. It's just an insane stat.
Exactly. So, hey, how do you see this? Do you see history repeating itself once more, or do you think Nikita gets it this time?
This is maybe the most interesting fight on the card outside of the main event to me, because
outside of the co-main event too?
Yeah, like I said, I think the co-main event really has
gotcha.
one question around it, and it's obviously interesting and compelling because of the characters. But I think you're only asking one question there, and whichever way the answer is, that's who wins the fight. With this fight, I have no idea what's going to happen because this shouldn't be a sneaky fight. When has Nikita Krylov been in a boring fight ever?
That's true.
Nicky thrills for a reason, man. He comes to bring it every time. OSP is usually in fun fights. He can occasionally have something maybe less interesting to watch. His fight with John Jones was not spectacular, let's just say that. But he also does weird, crazy things. He has 3 Von Flu chokes. Like he can do wild, wacky stuff out there at any moment. Nicky Thrills is going to force the issue. I think I might go with Nikita Krylov on this one, just because I do think he's improved a ton since their first one. Not to say OSP hasn't, but when they first fought, Nikita Krylov was still pretty green in general to what was happening in the UFC, and he turned into a really good fighter, albeit his last loss. I'm just going to pick Nicky Thrills to avenge that loss. Let's say he gets a Von Flu choke this time, just to make things fun.
Turning the tables, I like it. Well, hey, before we get out of here really quickly, let's take a very quick look at this undercard. It's not lighting the world on fire. There's a lot of guys without Wikipedia pages. We saw that at the weigh-ins. But hey, what are 1 or 2 fights that you maybe have your eye on that could be fun, could be maybe more consequential than people think?
Wilson Hayes, Alejandro Pantoja. It feels like it should be consequential. I don't know if it is because who knows what's going on with flyweights in the division these days. But that's your 4th and 5th ranked flyweights. A win there should put them right back in contention. Whether that's the case or not, we'll see. But it's certainly a good fight. You're talking 2 of, at the least, the top 10 best flyweights in the world. So that's always something I'm interested in. In the Fight Pass prelims part, I think they're still on Fight Pass, which is interesting with the new deal. But those, Curtis Molinder taking Curtis taking on Bilal Muhammad. I think that's a fight where the guy who wins that is probably looking at a fight to get himself ranked afterwards. They're both kind of on the outskirts of that upper echelon of the division. So maybe not a great fight, although I do think it will be fun. But that, and then obviously I'm always going to stand for Max Payne Griffin.
Tremendous nickname.
Tremendous fight name. Tremendously fun fighter. Again, another guy who tends to be in great scraps. So he's taking on a UFC debutant. So we'll see how that goes. But he just tends to be fun. So something I definitely want to look for.
Excellent. Well, hey, man, that about wraps it up here for us. This has been the UFC 236 preview show. Thank you so much for joining us, not only today, but just all throughout the week as we have brought you coverage from here in Atlanta. And the fun does not stop there. Keep it locked to MMA Fighting all day tomorrow for pre-fight coverage, post-fight coverage, all of the goodies that you have come to expect from this wonderful website. In the meantime, that's about it for us. My name is Shaun Al-Shatti. That man is Jed Meshew. For Esther, Casey, the entire MMA Fighting team, thank you once again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the fights. And we'll see you tomorrow.